Everybody ready? I call the Kitty Hawk Town Council meeting to order, August 4, 2014, at Kitty Hawk Town Hall. It is now 6 p.m. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and visiting with us, but there's about only one or two here, so thank you for coming anyway. And I hope folks are at least looking at home. Will you join me in a moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. All right, we have presentations, recognitions. Firefighter Engineer Mike Assalone. Chief Spivey?
Mayor, council, members of the public, my staff, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you firefighter Mike Assalone, who's being recognized tonight, moving up his career ladder to firefighter engineer. Mike came to us from Williamsburg, Virginia. He's married, lives over on Woodard Street, so he's close. His wife Erin and his son Dylan are here tonight. Mike graduated from Old Dominion University with a Bachelor of Science in Geography and has a minor in Environmental Science. He joined the fire department in January of 2011 as a volunteer. And during that 2011 season, he also worked with us as a seasonal lifeguard that year. He immediately began attending classes. He's received his firefighter certification from the state that required more than 240 hours. He did that through the Dare County Fire Academy. And we hired him full-time in January of 2012. Mike is a certified North Carolina EMT Level D. It's gone beyond the educational requirements for a firefighter engineer. He is a certified North Carolina Fire Inspector 1, Child Safety Seat Technician, certified Emergency Vehicle Technician. He's also certified and driver operator in both engine and aerial apparatus. He is a great asset to the team and the department, and a pleasure to work with. And he responds back usually, I will say, when he's off duty. And like I said, it's my pleasure, it's my honor to be able to introduce him to y'all tonight. Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for all that you do. I came home today, and there was a fire truck blocking the road. I couldn't even get home. But it wasn't my house, although when I first looked, I wasn't sure about that either. All right, now we have public comment. Lynn, has anyone signed up?
Yes, sir. Manny Medeiros.
Manny, come on up here. Tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. Good evening, neighbors. I'm going to speak fast, but I have only 3 minutes.
Pull that microphone over so that we can make sure we get.
Please.
I figured you could probably hear me without it, but that's all right.
Well, we want
Is
the folks
this
at home
good?
to be able to hear you too.
Is this good? Right there?
Thank you.
Well, you probably read a recent Washington Post story describing a whopping sea level rise of 39 inches by the year 2100, which of course is absurd. Unfortunately, computer models lacking supervision by human brains continue to advance and promote the notion that man is causing the planet to warm and sea level to rise, for which there's no statistically significant empirical evidence, folks. Now then, on July 27th, the National Geographic Society, likewise known for abject drivel concerning climate change, for example, this whole edition exactly 10 years ago, they published a similar whopper about global warming and sea level rise acceleration. First of all, sea level rise is not accelerating. It's simply continuing a very slow rise as we recover from the Little Ice Age. Furthermore, there's been no global warming for the last 18 years, man-made or otherwise. In spite of the fact we've had a continuing rise in carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, though, if you sit in front of a computer every day for 20 years, you start to think about computer models or something that's real. However, nature does not play computer games. So, I suspect that we are about to enter a silly season where once again a parade of computer model-oriented, self-proclaimed climate experts will trot out to the beach, to various venues, bringing presentations for us to stop climate change, particularly sea level rise. I suspect that even this council will be targeted to host such scaremongering. Thus, I believe it's important that this council recognize the fact that global thermometers, on average, have stubbornly refused to rise since 1996, making us wonder how many years a temperature trend must stop before alarmists begin to understand that the planet's just not warming. Clearly, global temperature stability the past 18 years was not predicted by global warming models being used today for policy making. Unfortunately, we're being threatened more by current global warming policy making than we are by global warming itself. Policies that are as futile and as useless as asking men to take the morning after pill. In listening to persons appearing before you, especially government-captured academicians that have repeatedly trotted out to this beach over the years, I suggest you apply the honest man test. Namely, when an honest man eventually learns that he's been wrong, that he's in error, he has two choices. Does he remain honest, or does he remain in error? And with that, I thank you for the 3 minutes.
Okay.
And do you have any questions? I'll be glad to answer if you do.
We don't normally do that, but I do have a question.
Oh, if I
The
can't
the
answer
reason
it,
that
I'll-
the reason I understood that you were going to speak tonight on this subject
Yes.
had to do with the CRC and
That's right.
3 vacancies on it.
Well, that's peripheral, the 3 vacancies. The issue is the CRC issued the most shabby report in 2010, and it took the legislature to knock that thing down, pass a law that refused anybody in the state from using that stuff. And then they were required by the year 2015 to produce a scientific report instead of a consensus report. They're starting to work on that now. In just a few months, they're going to have it before us. And so I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands what happened last time, and let's not let that happen this time, because it would just kill the whole Outer Banks if they were to go the way these people were going. And it's all just based on consensus. As you know, consensus is not the business of science. It's the business of politics. Science isn't a show of hands. Science basically is organized skepticism. So let's hope this new report that you just mentioned, Mr. Mayor, will have some science in it this time instead of just consensus of experts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I can have a suggestion, take this to Raleigh and talk to those yo-yos up there, because they need some help. Trust me.
Okay. You buy the gas, I'll go. No, I'm just kidding. If I'm invited, I'll be glad to do that. I really would. That's the kind of thing I do these days.
Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is anyone else signed up?
No.
Does anyone else wish to speak at this part of the public hearing? No? All right, let the record show no one came forward. Next, we have the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved as promulgated, and there are no items removed from it. All right, next we have a public hearing, and the public hearing is for a text amendment to the Section 42, TAC 528, dealing with solar energy systems. Do I hear a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Did you get that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are now in public hearing. Joe, you want to give us some update on it?
Right. Thank you, Mayor Perry, members of the council, and members of the public in attendance. Just wanted to share a little bit of information about the background of this ordinance. At your last meeting, Mayor Perry had asked a question just after you had set this hearing relating to, how did this come forward to the council? How did it get here? And I did want to just talk a little bit about that. First of all, just to let you know, this was an idea that was brought forth by staff to the planning board to consider some rules as we take a look at other solar energy projects popping up here and there, particularly in northeast North Carolina. Figured it might be a good idea to at least take a look at what standards the town would like to set for that, and to consider putting those in place before we get a project proposed where we feel like we're in a response mode or a defensive mode. So we took some time with the board and hopefully as well with the council to just consider what you think might work best in Kitty Hawk and take a look at adopting some standards for this. So should the town have a proposal, the staff will be able to pull something out and say, look, that's going to comply or it won't, or what the process would be for approval, what the standards would be for approval. And that way we'll be better prepared as a community. So with that in mind, we've pulled a lot of resources, some of which, probably the main document I'd say that we worked with was a model ordinance that was prepared with a whole lot of folks. North Carolina Solar Center and North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association were the main two who helped organize this effort. But there was involvement from many dozens of different interest groups, organizations, everybody from the business side of things to people associated with the solar industry. And they had put together a model ordinance. That document was a base document that we looked at and referred to. However, the draft ordinance you have before you doesn't resemble that one greatly, except maybe in the way that it's organized. In other words, they're dealing with, across the state, they're dealing with very large projects. I cited one in the staff report that had just been approved recently in Currituck County. Very large project, 225 acres. We're highly unlikely to see something of that nature in Kitty Hawk, just due to the land values, the amount of high ground, things of that nature. However, it is certainly within the realm of possibility that we would see a decent-sized project someday. If we're looking at a property owner who might have property where the soils just aren't that good, maybe it doesn't perk at all. Maybe they're going to be limited to larger lots, and their property might have a fairly minimal value. And we have a few folks out there like that right now that I'm aware of. Not that they're seeking this, but someday they may look at that property and say, okay, what can I do to I'm paying taxes on this property, I can't put a house on it, what can I do to get some economically viable use out of this property? So again, we're not talking about a 200-acre project or even a 40-acre or something like that, but it certainly wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to have something in that next lower range at some point in the future. And then the other thing this ordinance is intended to address in some manner are the smaller ones that people might use if they choose to help, work with their electric bills if they choose. I don't know that the numbers really work at this point in time, but there may be a point in time that they do, and they're looking at this as a supplemental source of electricity for their property. So it's intended to address everything from those small units on up to kind of decent-sized projects like that. And we've tried to address that by setting up a tiered system. So under the proposal in your draft ordinance you have before you, there are 3 different levels that are outlined in there. And basically what we've done is the small stuff, the things that are going to be individual property type of things, we've set up an approval process that would be very simple, administrative, and that could move forward. For the second tier, where you get over half, sorry, I'm going to pull it out here. Level 2 tier, looking at up to half an acre in size. Something that could be significant, in the right set of circumstances. So we do have some firmer development standards there. And those are things that in many districts, particularly in residential districts, would be a conditional use. So if somebody wants to do this in a residential area, they would have to come before the planning board and the council, and you would have the opportunity to evaluate the impact that this type of project might have. And then finally, for those larger level 3 projects, it's a more full-blown conditional use no matter what district you're in. So for those, that would come before the planning board and council no matter where it was proposed. And again, there's also another layer of standards that would have to be met that are outlined in the guidelines you have before you in the draft ordinance. So those were the ideas that, after some discussion, staff and ultimately planning board has recommended to the council for your consideration. And we'd certainly like to begin a similar type of discussion with the council as far as your consideration of standards that you would be comfortable with. So I'll leave it at that, but be glad to answer any specific questions the council members might have.
Okay, I have some, but I'll defer to you. Start on this side.
I do too, and that's just specific to the ordinance. When we get to the discussion part, there are things I'd like to just put before the rest of the council also.
Sure.
But Table 2 setbacks, I mentioned this to you, Joe, the table for level 2 that shows 30 feet, 15 feet, 25 feet, and level 3 also 50 feet across the board. There is no identifying which setback you're talking about, so I think that should be added to the table. The other thing about the ordinance that I don't agree with would be in the purpose statement. It seems to me that part of that purpose statement is more like cheerleading for solar energy than what the purpose of the actual ordinance is. So I would suggest that for the purpose, we define the purpose of this ordinance is to establish standards to facilitate the construction, installation, and operation of solar energy systems in the town of Kitty Hawk, period. And then delete everything that follows that until you get to the last 2 sentences that begin, this ordinance is not intended to circumvent safety, health, or environmental requirements contained in other applicable codes, standards, or ordinances. The provisions of this ordinance do not nullify any provisions of local, state, or federal law I just don't think it's really appropriate in the zoning code for, you know, an endorsement, if you will, of any particular type of system. Then the other changes that I would suggest would have to follow the discussion.
After the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Irvin, you have anything? Craig?
No, sir.
Jeff?
No, sir.
All right, I have a couple of questions that would be appropriate at this point of view, Joe. At present, would a proposal to build a solar be allowed without an ordinance?
The staff has permitted some small-scale residential applications, you know, as far as rooftop electric things, you know, just as an electrical fixture. The ordinance doesn't reference anything specific, so we've treated it as just another electrical fixture, and the staff has approved at least 3 things of that nature.
Well, I've seen some that
There's something
pool
that's used for heating the
heaters and things
pool.
of that nature.
Yeah, little, you know, they've been the smaller things. If we had received an application for anything larger, that would be panels, we would have brought that, you know, told them that's something that, or it's not clear the ordinance would permit, and brought that forward to the planning board and council. But
Okay.
at this point, we've only dealt with some small things.
Well, all right, then let's go with the second part to that. Can a person currently install a solar hot water heater, a system, without the ordinance? What would stop you? I guess where I'm going with this is for something of that nature, why do we need an ordinance? We already have the NC Building Code. Why would we need an additional ordinance?
Okay. The intent with that is simply to clarify that fact for the smaller things. While we were looking at setting standards for things that might be a little bit larger, like those level 2 type units, you know, that we were level 2 type systems, we figured we may as well put some wording in the ordinance about that to make clear the town's intention regarding those smaller units. So even though we have permitted them under a typical building code, you know, we require them to get an electrical permit. They are inspected as they're installed, but we wanted to clarify that that's the intent, if it is the intent of the council to allow those type of systems.
Well, if somebody wanted to, as you said, use their property, but it didn't perk, or it might be wetlands, or mostly wetlands, would this ordinance allow them to put a rather large solar farm over basically wetlands? It may not all be wetlands, but enough of it they couldn't use it for anything else. Would this ordinance allow that to occur?
You know, for the larger type, you know, anything over half an acre in size would fall under that level 3 category. It would take a conditional use permit. It would have to comply with all the standards in the ordinance, but it would certainly potentially allow that. And if it was over wetlands, of course, they would also have to receive permission from, you know, comply with the standards of the CAMA Act and the Corps of Engineers as, you know, as necessary.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for the moment. Anyone else have any questions of Joe before I ask for public comment?
I have just one. Is there not a house, is it in Kill Devil Hills or Kitty Hawk, on the beach road that has a sign that says solar house and the whole roof is a panel?
That's one of the ones that was approved, yes.
And that was just a regular approval?
Yeah, it's a residential installation of some solar roof panels.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this part of the public hearing? There's nobody here. All right, let the record show no one came forward. Do I hear a motion to go back into regular session?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, folks, we're back in regular session. Em, you wanted to talk, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to recommend we table this until the next meeting so we can all think about the things we've heard. But go ahead, Em.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of where I was going with this. I just want to ask the council, is this something we really want for Kitty Hawk? Particularly that SES 3 level? The way I look at that, we have the opportunity to put up solar panels that have a maximum height of 20 feet, that have the setbacks that we see in Table 2. In the Level 2, these are okay in residential districts. I guess the SES 3 are also available to residential districts. So that if someone has a lot next to you and has a 15-foot side yard setback, and there are no regulations in here that have to do with lot coverage for the posts or whatever these things are on. That's the kind of the impression I got from reading what was in here. And within 15 feet of your property line, you could have these arrays of solar panels. You know, I just want everybody to kind of think of that and decide whether this is something you really want to see happening in Kitty Hawk.
It's interesting to me that no other town in Dare County has yet pursued this,
Yeah.
but then this is before us.
Well, the way the code reads, the way I understand the code is, if it's not in there, we don't allow it. If it's not in the code, we don't allow it, correct?
That
And
would
this
be,
is our attempt to put something in the code to define the standards for this, because right now, if it isn't in the code, we don't allow it. Now, what you're talking about, putting them on roofs and hot water heaters and that kind of thing, that's all in the building code, so I would think that there's no problem with that.
and that's kind of where I was going with the
Yeah.
questions that I was addressing.
It's, the-
There is an avenue to do some of it. The larger 3 section is probably not something we want in Kitty Hawk. I'm not sure if by not passing this, that would negate that or not. That's where I got to do some thinking on this, and we all need to do that, I think. You will note, I will point this out before I make a motion, over on, well, the pages aren't numbered, but it's next to the last page, under 4. It's I-4. And basically, it's talking about performance reclamation bond. And I had asked Joe to put in some more stringent requirements to ensure that, you know, somebody doesn't walk off and leave us holding the bag, because that's what would happen. And I've seen that happen down in the Gulf with oil rigs and stuff of that nature. Mineral Management has had an awful time trying to get the drillers, the rig removed, and it's supposed to be done. I'm just trying to give us something more if we go this direction at all right? Okay, so look at that. That was added once we got the first part, and I asked for that. Now, I'm going to make a motion that recommends we table this to the September 2, 2014 meeting for further discussion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? All right, the matter is tabled. And I will bring it up to your attention on the information that Joe gave us. It was authored by a fellow who worked for the Southern Environmental Law Center's Land and Community Program. I don't know if you caught that or
I
not.
know I ain't gonna vote for it.
I just thought I'd point that out. All right. Next up, we have discussion of potential town code amendments to the location of septic tanks. And I'll bring up, before I ask John or Joe to step in on this, this came up with the subdivision. There were a lot of questions that I had that dealt with facts versus non-facts, and I wasn't sure what the truth was. Well, thanks to Joe and the planning board, they did a really, really good job of research. They put into verbiage things that make it easy to understand. And with what they've brought to our attention, we now have a clear set of facts, what is, what isn't. No more innuendo or those sort of things, and it's something that we can all, I think, go by. We do have one request to change something, so we'll address that. Joe, if you'll, for the public's input, kind of address the rest of it in a summary, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Perry. And just for the benefit of the public here, those who weren't involved, I'll just do a very, very brief background on how we got to this point and what the council is looking at right now. During the review of the West Village subdivision, there were some questions asked that I could not answer at that meeting, at that moment, relating to septic tank locations. And so I was asked to do some research on that. And after doing that, the council had asked me to present some things to the planning board for their consideration regarding possible standards, putting some things that we had done as interpretations in the past into an ordinance form, and looking at other standards that might be necessary to protect the interests of the citizens of the town. The planning board did spend a couple of months looking this over and really giving this some thought, asking some questions the first time around that we were able to answer some things to their satisfaction last month. And doing so, the board, rather than deciding to go ahead and propose changes to our ordinances, determined after looking at all of the factors involved that it was their opinion that the town didn't need to make any changes to our ordinances regarding the location of septic tanks. One of the items that they were looking at, specifically whether or not a septic tank could be located on another piece of high ground from a residence on the same property, or across a driveway or road on the same property. Town Attorney Steve Michael did some research on that and looking at the state law, and determined that the statutes did not authorize the town to engage in that type of regulation. So the board, that was, I guess, an easy decision after that advice to just say we can't go there, so we won't go there. So the second item they took a look at then had to do with whether or not a septic tank could be located on an adjoining property. In other words, not on the same lot as where the residence is located, but an adjoining property. That is something that is permitted by the Dare County Environmental Health Department, and the state in general authorizes them to do that. The one thing I do want to be clear on is when they do that, they require that there be a permanent legal document recorded, whether it's an easement or some other type of contractual arrangement, that holds that arrangement in perpetuity. In other words, it's not a 20-year lease. If the person sells the property, that right to continue to use that septic tank goes with it. So it's not something a later owner can cancel out. So I did want to be clear on that, so that you have some level of comfort in knowing that issue is addressed by the health department. So that was addressed, and just in general, the board, in looking at it, simply came to the conclusion that there didn't seem to be a very strong benefit to the town, but in some cases where this would apply, and fortunately it's not very many, it could cause great damage to a property owner who would be unable to develop a property if they weren't able to be approved for a septic tank on it. So the board felt that it was important to give owners that flexibility to enter into an arrangement on another property in the cases where that's needed. So the board did decide not to recommend any changes, but the other thing that the mayor was referring to that I guess the council would like to consider tonight is that the board went a step further, and part of the information we reported to them is that the staff has for 12 years been working off of an interpretation that was provided to us by the then town attorney. And that interpretation was that all improvements, including a septic system, needed to be on the same lot as the residence that it was placed on, or the residence it's serving. So the board has recommended to the council, town attorney, and ultimately staff that a different interpretation be used that would allow that. That's consistent. In other words, allow, if it's good enough for the health department and they have these appropriate things in place legally to allow that, then there's, they did not see a reason why the town should do that, and have asked that we consider discontinuing that interpretation and take an interpretation that we allow that in the future.
All right. Before I ask council what they want to do, if we drop the interpretation, in other words, the town basically gets out of the septic tank location business. Right now, it's kind of an overlapping rule. If we drop that, does it require any rewrite of that general standard that was being used as the interpretation?
Okay, Mayor Perry, I've had a chance to have a conversation with town attorney about that, and I'll let him add any comments to it, but thought was just that it would be something that might be a good thing to clarify in the ordinance if that's the direction council wants to go.
I know more about septic systems than I've ever wanted to know.
Well, you come here and you get educated.
I didn't know much about them before we started this conversation, but I did go and check the state statutes, and I quickly came to the conclusion that the state had preempted all of the municipalities from being able to do much. And one of the things they specifically mentioned in the state statute, there's a state commission on public health that makes these rules. And one of the things in the state statute about they're responsible for is topography and location on the property of where the septic system goes, which tells us we can't do that. Now, I did tell the planning board and Joe that I thought you probably could, if you chose to, through your land use zoning laws, to require that it all be on the same property if you chose to go that way. But I think you probably would have to do that by a change in your ordinance, notwithstanding the interpretation that was made. And let me tell you one of the reasons I think that is the North Carolina Administrative Code, which is where the rules are that have been adopted by the Health Commission. In those rules is provided that the entire wastewater sewage system shall be on property owned or controlled by the person owning or controlling the system. Necessary easements, right-of-ways, or encroachment agreements as applicable shall be obtained prior to the issuance of a construction authorization for the system installation or repair. And it goes on about what has to be in there, sort of what Joe has summarized to you. So the North Carolina rules that have been adopted do allow for exactly what we have interpreted our town code not to allow. So if we're going to allow it, in theory, we could say, well, whatever the health department will approve is okay as long as we have these protections in place that are required by the North Carolina administrative rules already. If you want to say you have to have it all on your lot that residence is on, I think you could probably do that. Currituck has done that, but they did that in conjunction with increasing the minimum lot size as well, which is another way to solve some of these problems. When you've got a 25,000 square foot minimum size lot, there's a lot more space to put things. But I would tell you that if you want to go away from that interpretation, because if you read the introduction to our zoning, the general statement, you could come away with the interpretation that, yeah, it all ought to be on the same lot. But our ordinance doesn't exactly say that. So if you want to do that, I would say, yeah, you probably ought to adopt the wording that's in the administrative rules and say, we will permit it this way. And if you don't, say no. And put that in your ordinance specifically, that it all has to be on the same lot.
All right, so if council decides tonight that they want to get out of the business entirely, there is some change that needs to be done.
I would say there is, one
All
way or
right.
the other,
All right,
so that we don't have interpretations anymore. We have
Gotcha.
a clear ordinance that says yes or no.
all right. And we don't have a proposed motion because it's a kind of a discussion item. So I'm going to ask each of you kind of what you want. Let's start with you, Jeff.
Mr. Mayor, I recommend to go with the decision that the planning board made. I think they did a great job, and I also think that the state and the county is in the septic tank business, and maybe it's time for us to get out of it and let them handle it and go with their rules.
Craig?
I agree, it's not a decision for us to make. It's pretty clear to me that the county and state have their own policy, bylaws, rules, and I think we should abide by those.
Irvin?
I got a question. So, and I agree with what you're saying, but having said that, if we go with that, does that mean someone on the ocean front whose septic system goes out can work a deal with a guy across the street from the ocean front and put a septic system across the road?
That would be up to the
County.
county, the local health department applying these rules as to what they would allow. And they have a lot of flexibility in what they can and won't do. But I will tell you, I got Nags Head to amend their ordinance in their commercial district a couple of years ago to allow a pipe under the road for property on the other side of the road. Because that was where the septic system was going to have to go from an oceanfront place. Now, they've specifically had in their ordinance that you couldn't do that, but they amended it because it just made sense. The people own the property across the street, so why not?
Jury's still out with me then.
Just to clarify, the only place in the code that deals with this is that, like, introductory area that
That's the
says
only
all
place
of the
it's talking
improvements have to be on the same lot.
Right.
So that's the only thing that we will have to change, put some sort of a caveat in there that says, with the exception of state-approved, blah, blah, or, I just don't know what would have to be
Yeah,
done.
somewhere in there, and Joe probably already has thought through that. I haven't thought through that process yet as to where it would go, but it would just be a statement that, whatever the health department will approve,
That's-
subject to these requirements.
Okay,
Councilwoman Klutz, we do have, there is a section specific to septic tanks
okay,
in our supplemental part of the code. Later on, that deals specifically, it sets some standards for septic systems as well as the larger commercial shared systems, like what you'd see at Walmart, that kind of thing. So that's another section we would probably want to put something in. So it may involve, this sentence in each of them.
Okay.
Just to be sure that anyone looking for it is going to find it and know what the intent of the council is.
okay. And the only thing I would like to add is I really appreciated everything you did, Joe, to answer the questions that I had. And also, I really appreciate this in-depth look that you brought before the planning board and the result of their deliberations. I think it was just really very, very helpful.
All right. I agree that we should stay out of it, that there are plenty of rules already in place. We don't need to be overlapping what the state and county are already doing. And to that end, since we don't have a motion and we've kind of been discussing it, I'm going to propose the following motion. I'm making this up as I go. That we approve the recommendations put forth by the planning board in a memo that was dated July 25th, 2014. And that memo was to the mayor, members of council, from Chairman Oscar Northern and the planning board. In addition to that, we direct the planner to make whatever changes are appropriate in the code to fit this recommendation. Am I okay with that?
And it's going to have to go back through the planning board and back to you guys. 'cause
Sure.
it's a zoning.
I understood that.
Okay.
All right, Joe, you got that?
Yes, sir.
All right, do I have a second to that made-up motion?
second, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Do we have any further discussion?
I got a question to Joe. Joe, with this, do you see any adverse effects by what we're doing for future development, and even positive or negative?
I think as the board has summarized in the memo, it's offering greater flexibility for
Right.
property owners. You're offering an opportunity to people that, and again, we're not talking about a large number of these
Sure.
that pop up. Since I've been here, we've dealt with 3 that I can recall. Instances where someone had a property that would not support a septic system. So with that in mind, it's not something that's going to change a whole lot in the town, but for those owners who are in that situation, it's a very important decision to allow this flexibility. So I think overall, from that standpoint, it would be positive in allowing the owners some alternative.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, you got work for yourself. All right, we have new business, and we have a schedule for approval of municipal service districts. We had to slide that a little bit. John, would you bring us up to date on that? for
Yeah,
the
Mr.
public's
Mayor,
benefit?
in March, the council approved a schedule for the development and approval of the municipal service districts, and due to a need by the staff to obtain more information from the consultant as to the cost of the storm damage reduction project before it's discussed with the public, we're requesting a revision to the schedule that was approved previously. And basically, this schedule, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but basically it would start in September of this year, and then it would conclude with adoption of MSDs in June of 2015, and then MSDs go into effect with appropriate tax rate in 2015. So that's what we're asking to do.
And the reason this had to change was because there's a little bit behind on some of the
Yes,
engineering.
we're waiting to get some cost estimates from the consultant, whereby we can apply those cost estimates to the MSDs, to the municipal service districts, and be able to explain to the public exactly perhaps the effect of the cost on the districts.
All right, thank you. All right, do I hear a motion?
Can I make one recommendation on this?
Certainly
At
can.
at your October 6th, where you're mailing the public hearing notification, I think it would be good at that time to also put out a press release that goes into a little bit about what this is. That would go to the local newspapers and perhaps the blog, whatever information type blog is
Okay.
available. Just because it would, bring people's attention to the fact that this is about to happen, and it'll give them a little bit more information about
Okay,
what it is.
sure, no problem.
Okay.
All right, you want to make a motion?
I move that the schedule with the recommended addition of press release for the October 6th milestone for the establishment of the municipal service districts for the town of Kitty Hawk be revised as presented by the town manager.
Do I hear a second?
second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, John, you got it.
All right.
Next, we have a discussion on beach tent canopies. And if I looked at The Voice and others, holes in the beach and stuff of that nature, I didn't know what that was. Em had to tell me what they were talking about there. So, John, you want to bring us up to date so council can kind of
Yes,
discuss this?
Mr. Mayor, council requested that we investigate the use of the beach canopies in town and determine if it's creating a problem and how you could eliminate the problem. I met with Chief of Police and Fire Chief after the meeting on July 7th and discussed this possibility. It was the opinion of the Chief of Police and the Fire Chief that there is not a problem with the beach canopies. Memo was then sent out to council on July 9th summarizing the possible solutions to leaving of the beach canopies overnight. We feel like that if council wishes to adopt an ordinance, we could the council could adopt the ordinance and signs could be posted and to see exactly how that works with the enforcement. But it's really up to council whether or not you want to try to go ahead with an ordinance. We had Southern Shores and does have an ordinance to that effect, and we included a copy of that within the packet.
All right, thank you. For discussion purposes, let's go through council and see what you feel, and then we'll give some direction to the manager. Em? You
Well,
live on the beach. I know you
Yeah.
got a lot to say about it.
well, I don't like the idea of an ordinance. I think it would be addressing, for us at least, a problem that both the police and the fire departments think does not exist. I think one of the things that we could do, our ocean rescue folks are always very involved in talking to people about rip currents and other hazards on the beach. And during those discussions, if they would just mention that it would be a good idea because of the potential safety issues for emergency personnel, for them to take not only their trash away when they leave the beach, but also their beach paraphernalia and any other problems that they may be leaving behind. What we see on the blogs about the beach holes is these are the holes that are dug usually by parents playing with their children, getting the water into the, into a little pool, or making a hole that they can use as a fort, and when they leave really deep holes on the beach. That sometimes does cause some problems. I always look at joggers on the, that are running on the beach, and I wonder how many sinkholes they're going to put their feet in, because sometimes the sand comes over and it just doesn't quite, it's like quicksand. They come down hard and they can go up to their knees in sand. So between the, maybe the ocean rescue folks just adding a little bit to what they already talk to people on the beach about, and then the brochure that's handed out with the tide tables, it's very popular, people like to receive it. There's already a line in that brochure that says, when you leave the beach, take your trash with you. You could add a few words there about taking their beach equipment with them also, and if it's put into the language like this does cause a potential impediment to the emergency personnel access to the beach, but take your equipment with you, fill up your holes, and have a great day at the beach. That's where I would go with it.
Herbert?
I had the experience yesterday going up and down the beach. Remember we borrowed the places, the little gator. That thing can go. at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I saw one tent, and it was down by Winks. And so I don't see there's an issue. I think that your synopsis of there's not an issue, or, I agree with that. I do have something, Emma touched on this, the greatest asset we have, folks, are the customer service orientated people with the beach rescue. Golly days. I mean, every time that I'm out there, they're always talking to the customer. They'll ride down 20 yards and stop and get off and go talk to somebody at the ocean front, talk to somebody back on the dune. There was a guy that flicked a cigarette, and the guy got off the four-wheeler, saw him do it, and the guy went and picked the cigarette up. I mean, that's good customer service. So they're our greatest asset, and I think we utilize those people. We counteract any kind of negativity that's out there, and I think that's the good point. Let them do it.
Craig?
I agree. We've talked to Chief Johnson, Chief Spivey. They both say we don't have a problem. I know the gentleman made a presentation, and his 3-minute talk at our last council meeting is what started this whole conversation. And we've got a nice letter here from a lady who shares a concern. I don't think we've got a problem enough to pass an ordinance. I agree 100%. Some signs or just some nice conversations from our staff we have. If we pass an ordinance, somebody's got to enforce it. It's going to cost us money, and I don't like that.
I think it's all been said. I agree. We don't need to be paying staff to go around, and I think it just doesn't seem welcoming to start tagging these tents. It's something doesn't seem right about it. I think that Emily's answer was the best way to let our beach rescue, which does a fine job, continue what they're doing in educating the people for safety reasons to please move them off the beach, and let's see what happens from there.
Okay. Well, I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made so far. I don't want to add any ordinances we don't have to add. I do think that if there is a problem, when there becomes a problem that we're told exists, as far as police can tell us that, and then we'll act in accordance with what we can do to make sure it works. I don't want to add people. I don't want to add overtime. So let's try the education first. And if next year, if it doesn't work this year, next year, maybe we can look at perhaps the stickers like Kill Devil Hills is doing. They don't have an ordinance. It's just a sticker, and it's kind of a courteous thing that says, please take this with you when you go. We can try that. And we'll go those routes instead of an ordinance, if we can, as long as we can. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes, sir.
All right. We have a consensus. All right.
Okay, all right. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Next, we have comments from the town manager.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I have a few items mentioned to council. A couple of compliments we had. We had one from Vicki Marandina. Vicki just wanted to let us know that she was recently visiting Kitty Hawk, and she was out on the beach, and she noticed a young boy was going out too far in the surf and was spotted by one of the ocean rescue lifeguards. And then the lifeguard stopped and motioned the young boy to return to the beach. And she was very impressed with the action of the ocean rescue, and she's very appreciative of what the ocean rescue does to keep everybody safe out there. So I mentioned that. Received a compliment from Jan Collins. She just wanted to thank the town for debris pickup following Hurricane Arthur. So it was very helpful in that regard. Also wanted to mention to council that I know we did talk about the grant from CAMA, but we did receive the signed copy of the contract with CAMA for the Lillian Street Beach Access Parking Expansion Project, and we're now in a position to apply for a Tourist Bureau grant in the August-September timeframe. So we will proceed to go ahead and make the application with the Tourist Bureau for that match. And finally, I wanted to briefly bring council up to date where we're at with the storm damage reduction project, and what coastal planning engineering is doing. They completed the VibraCore operations, which started on July the 22nd. And they told us that they have a high degree of confidence to be able to design a bar area offshore that will support our project. Coastal Planning also reports they've made progress in determining the benefits from a berm-only plan and a minimum dune plan, which we've talked to them about, and they'll be bringing us some more information in this regard this month. As for permitting, a draft essential fish habitat and biological assessment has been submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And CP&E is also finishing the preliminary environmental assessment to submit to the Army Corps of Engineers and BOEM in the coming weeks. So I just kind of bring council up to date on where we're at with that particular project. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and an additional comment on the Corps. All the information we were getting seemed to suggest that there's a sufficient amount of sand to do all these projects,
Yes.
which is good news, and sand that apparently is fairly close.
Yes,
so
it's located in an area where it could be cost-effective for us.
That's
Yes.
even better.
Yes, sir.
All right, good deal. All right, Mr. Attorney.
Nothing else for you tonight?
No, no, you talked a lot tonight. That's good. All right, town council? Yeah?
Yes, I'd like to report, I attended the Kitty Hawk Recreation Committee meeting July the 29th, and they appointed their officers, and Christine Buckner was reappointed as chairwoman, and Dusty Rhodes as vice chairman. Also at this meeting, they were updated by Chairwoman Buckner of the Lillian Street parking extension, and they also had some new business that they talked about around the round table and discussion, but they wanted to wait before bringing any of it out until the Lillian Street project is complete. They feel like they want to see this finished before any new items are brought before the council. They want to see this one done. There was a few other things that were brought up that just things that need to be talked to administratively in the town. That's all I have.
Thank you. Craig?
No, sir.
Irvin?
Once again, thanks for the police department's help and the fire department and Ocean Rescue for the sandbar this weekend. It was a total success. We run even in the rain, and we had like 375 runners, I think. And once again, it all goes back to the community, which is a great thing. I had a question someone out there asked me, and I didn't have the answer to him, so I'm asking anybody here that can tell me. When Dominion Power put the new big gigantic poles up, the question was asked to me, when they did that in Nags Head, they slowly but surely took all the small telephone poles that were around those poles down. And it seems like they put the big poles in Kitty Hawk, and they still left the small poles there. Is there any future plans, anybody knows, of those poles coming down?
Well, there was a letter I remember seeing when all of that was going on that said that, or if I remember correctly, it was like the cable company
Yeah.
had to take their equipment and move it, and they had not budgeted for that. But that was all supposed to
was
be
the telephone
happening.
company.
The telephone company. But that was all supposed to be happening, and as soon as that part was finished, all the poles were supposed to come down. The little poles were supposed to come down. And was it,
I thought they had.
that's,
That's how much I pay
was,
attention.
I was under the impression they were not going to be taken down. I asked the question when the big ones come up, the little ones were going down. They said, no, it's a more. It's not, they need the little ones and the big ones.
And whether they do or don't, I'm just trying to get an answer for somebody.
Or-
Now,
You're
Nags
not,
Head,
you're
the
not talking
poles are-
about the transmission poles between the big ones that also support the transmission lines, do you? Is that what you're talking about? Because they're not coming down.
That's the little ones underneath of the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're going to stay. They're needed to help support those transmission lines.
Well, but I thought that there was a lower arm on those big poles, that all that
And
stuff
in
was
Nags City,
supposed to
Emily,
be
you're exactly
moved
right,
to.
and the smaller poles came
Came
down.
down, yeah.
All the transmission goes on the bypass. There are no small poles on the bypass, they're all on the big poles.
I'll have to look. Right,
Yeah.
you got me.
Yeah, I do recall there was correspondence about that, and that
On the
was
side
what
streets,
it
you have
was
the
supposed
smaller
to
poles,
be.
but on the big ones, the majority of and there are some isolated instances there, but the majority of them are down.
Okay. I don't know the answer.
Well, if anybody finds that, let me know.
Yeah.
What you got? Amy?
I would really like to give a big thank you to our police department. I'm not sure that everyone is aware that we had vandalism on mailboxes on Lindbergh Avenue from Bird Street to Lillian Street. I think there were 74 or more mailboxes that were knocked down, pounded, all kinds of damage. And I'm an early riser, and when I noticed my mailbox, I called, and police came very promptly. And within, a half an hour, the police department was out making it right, putting the poles back in the holes, and actually fixing the damage. And they also got the perpetrators. So anyway, I just want to say a big thank you. There were so many neighbors of mine that did not even know that their mailboxes were on the ground. And they were all put back before they even woke up. So that was just a wonderful thing that police department did for our people. It saved them a lot of trouble and annoyance. And they got the bad guys, and I think that's just great. Thank you.
Good deal. Yeah, you called me and told me about that.
Yeah.
All right, my turn. I do have a couple of updates. The Overton property. Friday, I received a call back from the attorney that's dealing with that estate. And as of Friday, they have filed the 30-day notice necessary to take action unless somebody comes forward, and he did not expect that because he's having trouble getting anybody to come forward. In 30 days, the property will be up for sale, and there are buyers, or at least one buyer for sure. In the meantime, I asked about my question about having the town go in and bush hog that if the fellow that he had talked to before wasn't, and he said he gave me permission. I have talked to Willie, and John's aware of it. And as soon as it stops raining, when the monsoons depart, maybe we'll get in there and bush hog that. That'd probably take, that bush hogging to take it through our fall anyway, hopefully so. I don't know about the rest of you, but the birds are using my yard as a bird bath, so man, it's something else. I also received a call today from the New Yorker magazine inquiring about our beach nourishment and all that goes with that. So there is interest way far away from here. When do we stop ocean rescue? After Labor Day?
Yes. Lifeguards come off Labor Day, and then we have a shoulder season that runs October the 1st.
But that shoulder season involves just an ATV running down there once a day or something?
2 ATVs and a supervisor, yes, sir.
What does that accomplish? And where I'm leading with this is, do we want to stop that? Do we want to stop that whole process after Labor Day? That's where I'm going with that.
Well,
Tell me what that accomplishes.
we still have a lot of beach patrons after Labor Day. And they're doing basically the same thing, we just don't have stationary stands anymore in 3 locations. But they're performing rescues, continuing to talk to the beach patrons, doing the exact same thing we're doing during the summer. I think the other municipalities go to October the 15th. We, for budgetary purposes, cut that last 2 weeks off 3 or 4 years ago, and we've been stopping at October 1st.
And how much time are they spending on the beach?
They're spending a full day on the beach, just like they do now.
Okay.
They actually cut an hour off.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it's 10 to 5, and it's an ATV, just going back and forth. The beach certainly isn't as crowded after Labor Day as it is, and I don't know, I remember one time being told that the people that are on the beach after Labor Day are the newlywed and nearly dead, and I knew what category I fell in. And there really isn't, I don't think there's, I don't think that there's as much activity required from certainly from the ocean rescue, just because there are people that are coming out. There are probably a lot of returning people, and parents of little teeny children are usually pretty vigilant with them, so.
Okay. Where I'm going with this is for next year. We've got it budgeted in this year, so we're going to go on with it. But next year, let's look at it and see if we still need to continue it. Council will be thinking along those lines when we get into those budget talks. And I'm bringing it up so that you'll be aware that it's going to come up. You might want to provide stats, if that would be helpful to us. How much are you doing as far as rescues and those sort of things?
We can do that, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all I have. Next, we have public comment. Anyone wish to speak? Let the record show no one came forward. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you get the second?